the elemental principle of air, the elemental principles of air, a elemental principle of air, the elemental principle of earth, the elemental principles of earth, a elemental principle of earth, the elemental principle of fire, the elemental principles of fire, a elemental principle of fire, the elemental principle of gem, the elemental principles of gem, a elemental principle of gem, the elemental principle of ice, the elemental principles of ice, a elemental principle of ice, the elemental principle of lightning, the elemental principles of lightning, a elemental principle of lightning, the elemental principle of metal, the elemental principles of metal, a elemental principle of metal, the elemental principle of thunder, the elemental principles of thunder, a elemental principle of thunder, the elemental principle of water, the elemental principles of water, a elemental principle of water, the elemental principle of wood, the elemental principles of wood, a elemental principle of wood, the elemental principle of light, the elemental principles of light, a elemental principle of light, the elemental principle of dark, the elemental principles of dark, a elemental principle of dark, the elemental principle of anointing, the elemental principles of anointing, a elemental principle of anointing, the elemental principle of unanointing, the elemental principles of unanointing, a elemental principle of unanointing, the elemental principle of blessing, the elemental principles of blessing, a elemental principle of blessing, the elemental principle of cursing, the elemental principles of cursing, a elemental principle of cursing, the elemental principle of predestiny, the elemental principles of predestiny, a elemental principle of predestiny, the elemental principle of destiny, the elemental principles of destiny, a elemental principle of destiny, the elemental principle of faith, the elemental principles of faith, a elemental principle of faith, the elemental principle of fear, the elemental principles of fear, a elemental principle of fear, the elemental principle of archangels, the elemental principles of archangels, a elemental principle of archangels, the elemental principle of archdemons, the elemental principles of archdemons, a elemental principle of archdemons,